The bonding wine tasted like black cherries and iron, and it burned a line of fire down Ilara's throat before she even realized what she had swallowed. She had been carrying the goblet across the altar platform, her fingers wrapped around the cold silver stem, the way she had carried 1,000 goblets before, the way a serving girl carries things pressed close to the body so nothing spills. The hem of her grey linen dress, the one with the frayed stitching along the collar that she had re-sewn 3 times with thread she pulled from a curtain in the kitchens, caught the edge of the stone step. Her ankle twisted. The goblet lurched, and in the desperate, animal reflex of someone who knows that dropping anything means another night locked in the root cellar beneath the pack house, she pressed the rim to her lips and caught the wine in her mouth instead of letting it splash across the white altar cloth. She swallowed before she thought. The great hall of the Silver Ridge pack went silent. Not the gradual hush of people noticing something wrong, but the instant, violent silence of 400 wolves who had all smelled it at the same moment. The bonding wine. The ceremonial chalice meant for Serena Ashworth, the Bater's daughter, the woman chosen to offer herself as mate to the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, who was standing 6 feet away with his back turned, mid-conversation with Elder Gregor about border patrol rotations. Ilara felt the wine hit her stomach like a fist of heat. It spread through her chest, up through her ribs, behind her sternum, into the base of her skull. The room tilted. The silver goblet slipped from her fingers and rang against the stone floor like a bell, and the sound seemed to come from very far away, because something was happening inside her body that she had no name for. Something enormous and ancient and completely beyond her control. Her knees buckled. She went down hard on the altar steps, the stone edges biting into her shins through the thin fabric, and the last thing she saw before her vision went white was the Alpha King turning around. His eyes were already gold. Let me tell you about Ilara Voss, because in about 90 seconds, this girl who had spent 3 years scrubbing the packhouse floors on her hands and knees with a brush made of boar bristles was going to change the course of 5 kingdoms, and she deserved to have her story told properly. She came to Silver Ridge at 15, the year her mother died. Her mother had been a wandering healer, one of the wolfless ones who travelled between packs, offering poultices and bone-setting and quiet advice about pregnancies that weren't going well. They had lived out of a canvas rucksack and a series of borrowed beds. Ilara remembered her mother's hands most clearly, the way the fingertips were always stained yellow-brown from turmeric and calendula, the way they smelled like eucalyptus oil even after washing. When her mother's cough turned to blood, they were camped in a lean-to outside Silver Ridge territory. The pack healer refused to come to the border. Wolfless were not pack business. Ilara buried her mother in a shallow grave she dug with a cooking pot because she did not own a shovel. She was 15 years old and weighed 87 pounds, and her wolf had never manifested. And when Alpha Harlan of Silver Ridge found her sleeping against the cemetery wall 3 days later, he did not take her in out of kindness. He took her in because his pack house needed another pair of hands to scrub the latrines, and a wolfless orphan would work for food and a pallet in the storage room behind the kitchens. 3 years of that. 3 years of rising before dawn to haul water from the well in the east courtyard, the one with the broken crank handle that tore blisters across her palms until the blisters became calluses, and the calluses became hard yellow ridges that no longer felt anything at all. 3 years of eating whatever was left after the pack had finished, which was usually cold porridge with the skin on top, or bread ends that had gone stale enough to crack a tooth. She had lost a molar on the left side to a piece of bread like that, and the gap ached when the weather turned cold. She did not complain. This was not because she was noble or long-suffering, or any of the things that stories like to say about girls in her position. It was because complaining required an audience that cared, and she did not have one. The pack largely pretended she did not exist. This was, in its way, worse than active cruelty. Active cruelty. At least acknowledged you were there. The wolves of Silver Ridge walked past Elara in the hallways, the way they walked past the coat hooks and the boot scraper. She was furniture. She was function. She was the mechanism by which the pack house remained clean, and the fireplaces remained stocked, and the ceremonial linens remained pressed. Except for Serena Ashworth, who had decided early on that ignoring Elara was insufficient. Serena was 22, the Beta's only daughter, and she was beautiful the way a glacier is beautiful. Pale skin, white blonde hair, eyes like winter sky. She had been groomed since birth for an advantageous mating, and when word came that the Alpha King of the Northern Territories was touring the southern packs looking for a potential Luna, Serena's father had put Silver Ridge forward as a host with the kind of aggressive politicking that left no room for subtlety. The bonding ceremony tonight was meant to be the opening gesture. Serena would offer the ceremonial wine to the Alpha King. He would drink, and if the spirits deemed them compatible, his wolf would respond. It was largely a formality. Alpha Harlan and Beta Ashworth had been negotiating this match for 6 months. The wine was a tradition, not a test. Everyone knew the Alpha King would drink, declare compatibility, and proceed with the courtship rituals. It was politics, wearing a costume of romance. But now Elara had the wine inside her, and she was on her knees on the altar steps, and her body was doing something that bodies were not supposed to do. Heat poured through her like someone had opened a furnace door in her chest. Her skin felt too tight. Her vision, which had gone white, was slowly returning, but the colors were wrong. Everything was saturated, hyper-real. She could see the individual threads in the altar cloth. She could see the dust motes in the candlelight. She could see, with a clarity that made her stomach drop, every face in the great hall staring at her in horror. And she could smell something. It cut through the fog of incense and beeswax and the smoky char of roast venison from the feast tables. It cut through the close, sweaty smell of 400 bodies, packed into a stone hall. It was cedar wood and rain-soaked granite, and something darker underneath. Something that reminded her of the way the air smelled, right before lightning struck the old pine tree outside her mother's favorite camping spot. Elara knew what that smell was. Every wolf child learned about mate bonds before they learned to read. The scent of your fated mate was supposed to be unique, unmistakable. The one smell in the world that your wolf recognized as home. But she did not have a wolf. She had never had a wolf. The heat in her chest pulsed, and deep beneath her ribs, something stirred. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. She heard a voice. It did not come from outside her. It came from the place between her heart and her spine, and it said one word, so clearly that she almost looked around to see who had spoken. Mine. Then her vision went dark, and she collapsed face first onto the altar steps. She did not see what happened next, but 400 witnesses did, and in the years that followed, every single one of them would tell the story slightly differently, but the core facts remained the same. The Alpha King moved before she hit the stone. Kyle Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, ruler of the 5 mountain packs, the youngest king in 3 centuries, and the most feared wolf alive, crossed the distance between himself and the fallen serving girl in 2 strides. He caught her before her face struck the step edge. He went to one knee, scooped her off the ground like she weighed nothing, and for a moment he simply stood there holding her, his gold eyes burning in a face that had gone completely still. The great hall remained frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. Kyle Blackthorne was not a man that people described casually. He was 6'4", built like the mountains he ruled, broad through the shoulders and heavy through the arms in the way of wolves who had fought real wars, not ceremonial ones. His hair was black and cut short, close to the skull in the military style of his father's generation. A scar ran from his left temple to the hinge of his jaw, a pale raised line against tanned skin, a souvenir from the border war with the eastern clans that had killed his father and put him on the throne at 21. He was 28 now. 7 years of ruling 5 packs had ground away whatever softness might have existed in his face. What remained was hard angles and controlled fury, and a pair of amber eyes that made lesser wolves drop their gaze without being told. Those eyes were fixed on Elara's unconscious face, with an expression that no one in the great hall had ever seen on the Alpha King before. It took Serena Ashworth exactly 4 seconds to recover from her shock. She stepped forward, her white ceremonial gown swishing against the floor, her face arranged in an expression of gracious concern that did not quite reach her eyes. "Your Majesty, I am so sorry. That girl is a servant. She must have tripped. The wine was meant for me. If we could simply prepare another goblet, we can proceed with her name." Kael's voice was low. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the kind of voice that made the air in the room change pressure. Serena blinked. "I am sorry." "Her name. What is her name?" She is just a servant, Your Majesty. I do not think she has a name." He said it without looking up from Elara's face. "Everyone has a name. I am asking you what it is." Beta Ashworth stepped forward, his hand on Serena's shoulder, his expression a carefully calibrated blend of apology and damage control. "Your Majesty, the girl is an orphan we took in. Elara, I believe. Wolfless. She has no standing in this pack or any other. The ceremony can be restarted easily. If I might suggest, you might not." The 2 words fell like stones into water. Kael shifted Elara's weight in his arms, tucking her closer to his chest. Her head fell against his shoulder, and the movement exposed the side of her neck, the thin skin over the pulse point. Kael's nostrils flared. His jaw tightened so hard that the scar along his temple went white. Every wolf in the room felt it. The bond. It poured off him like heat from an open furnace. And even wolves who had never experienced a true mate bond recognized it for what it was, because the sheer force of it made their own wolves cower. "This woman," Kael said, and his voice had dropped into a register that was not entirely human, a harmonic beneath the words that vibrated in the chest bones of everyone present, "is my mate." The silence that followed was so complete that the sound of wax dripping from a candle onto the altar cloth was clearly audible. Serena Ashworth's face went through several transformations in rapid succession, from shock to disbelief to something hard and bright and furious that she smoothed away almost instantly, but not quite fast enough. "That is not possible. She is wolfless. The bond cannot. My wolf has never been wrong about anything in the 12 years since he manifested. He is not wrong now." Kael was already turning towards the doors. "I am taking her to the healers. We will discuss pack hospitality later, Alpha Harlan. Specifically, we will discuss why a woman under your roof weighs less than my youngest soldier's rucksack." He walked through the great hall, carrying Elara, and the crowd parted for him the way water parts for a ship's bow, pressed against the walls, eyes down, throats exposed in instinctive submission. His 4 royal guards fell into formation behind him without being told, their boots loud on the stone floor. Behind him, in the silence of the altar, Serena Ashworth stood in her white ceremonial gown, her fists clenched at her sides, and watched the doors close. Elara woke up in a bed that smelled like clean linen. This was so disorienting that she lay still for several seconds with her eyes closed, trying to figure out what had gone wrong with her reality. Her pallet in the storage room smelled like damp burlap and onions from the root vegetables stored on the shelf above her head. Clean linen smelled like this, like sunlight and soap, and a faint whisper of lavender from a sachet tucked between the sheets. She knew the smell because she was the one who washed the pack's linens every Tuesday. She opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was not the low, water-stained storage room ceiling with the crack that looked like a river map. It was high and white, with heavy timber beams, and there was actual sunlight coming through an actual window with actual glass in it, not the greased paper covering of the storage room's single ventilation gap. She turned her head, and the Alpha King of the Northern Territories was sitting in a wooden chair beside her bed, watching her. The sound she made was not a scream. It was something smaller and more strangled than that, the kind of sound a person makes when they are too exhausted and confused for a real scream, but the situation clearly demands one. Easy. His voice was different from the way it had sounded in the Great Hall. Quieter, almost careful, like he was talking to a wild animal he did not want to spook. You are safe. You collapsed at the ceremony. Do you remember? She remembered the wine, the heat, the voice inside her that said mine. Her hand flew to her throat, feeling for... She did not know what. Something wrong. Evidence. The healer says, "You are dehydrated and malnourished," Kael said. His amber eyes tracked the movement of her hand, and something in his expression tightened, a muscle near his jaw that jumped and went still. She says, "You have been malnourished for a long time. Years." Elara tried to sit up. The room swayed. She dropped back onto the pillow. "I need to get back. The ceremony. I ruined the ceremony. Alpha Harlan will do nothing to you. Not now. Not ever again." "You do not understand. The wine was for Serena. It was the bonding wine, and I drank it. I tripped and I swallowed it, and I have ruined everything, and they are going to put me in the root cellar again, the one under the pack house where the floor is dirt and the water comes in when it rains. And last time I was down there for 4 days, and my fingers went numb from the cold and—" She stopped talking because she realized she was babbling, and also because she realized from the expression on the Alpha King's face that she had said too much. His eyes had gone from amber to a deeper gold, the kind of gold that was not quite wolf, but not quite human, the transitional shade that meant the beast was very close to the surface. 4 days, he said quietly, in a flooded cellar. It was not a question. It was not. It was only when I made mistakes. It was a punishment. It was fair. Even as she said it, the words tasted false. She had been telling herself that for 3 years, that it was fair, that a wolfless orphan should be grateful for any roof at all, that the cellar was better than sleeping outside. She had been telling herself that so long it had become a kind of liturgy, and hearing it spoken aloud to this man in this clean linen room, the words suddenly sounded like what they actually were, an excuse for cruelty. Kael was quiet for a moment. His hands were on his knees, and she noticed that his knuckles were white, the tendons standing out like cables. He was holding himself very still in the way that a man holds himself still when the alternative is violence. "I need to ask you something," he said, and I need you to answer honestly. Can you do that?" She nodded. She was afraid to speak. "When you drank the wine, what did you feel?" "The heat, the stirring, the voice, mine." "I felt warm," she said, "and then something inside me woke up. Something that has never been there before. And I smelled—" She stopped. Her face went hot. "What did you smell?" "Cedar," she whispered, "and rain on stone, and lightning." The tension in his body changed. It did not decrease, but it shifted from the tension of controlled anger to something else, something that looked almost like pain. "Do you know what the bonding wine does?" he asked. "It reveals compatibility between potential mates. The wolf responds to the wine, and it does not reveal compatibility. That is the simplified version. What the bonding wine actually does is strip away every barrier between a wolf and its bond. Every wall, every suppression, every cage. If a true mate bond exists between two people, the wine tears it open. It does not create bonds. It only reveals ones that already exist." The implication settled over her like cold water. "But I do not have a wolf," she said. "I have never shifted. I have never felt—" "You felt something in that hall. You told me something woke up. That does not mean I smelled you from across the room." His voice had gone rough, the way sandpaper sounds when you drag it across grain. "Before you drank the wine. Before the ceremony. I walked into that hall and my wolf went insane. I have spent the last hour sitting in this chair, trying to keep him from climbing out of my skin and curling around you like a shield. I have fought wars, Elara. I have killed men in battle and made peace with my enemies and ruled 5 packs since I was 21 years old. Nothing in my life has ever been as difficult as sitting in this chair and not touching you." She stared at him. Her heart was doing something arrhythmic and dangerous. The thing inside her chest, the thing that had stirred when she drank the wine, was pressing against her ribs like a fist trying to open. "That is the mate bond," she said. "Yes. But I am wolfless." "Clearly you are not. I am an orphan, a servant. I clean latrines and haul firewood, and I have a missing tooth on the left side, and my hair has not been properly washed in 3 weeks, because we ran out of soap in the servants' quarters, and no one replaced it. I do not care. You are the Alpha King. I am aware. You came here to court Serena Ashworth. I came here because the bond pulled me south. I thought it was the territory. I thought it was politics. It was you." He leaned forward in the chair, and she could see the scar along his jaw more clearly now. The way it caught the light. The way the skin around it was slightly different in texture, newer. "I have waited 7 years for my mate. My council has paraded every eligible wolf daughter from 5 territories in front of me. Not one of them made my wolf so much as lift his head. You tripped on a step and swallowed ceremonial wine, and my wolf nearly broke my spine trying to get to you. I do not care about your teeth or your hair or your standing in this pack. I care that you are mine, and you are starving, and someone put you in a flooded cellar for 4 days, and is still breathing." That last part was not said with anger. It was said with a calm, factual certainty that was significantly more frightening than anger. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "First, I am going to feed you. Then I am going to have the healer look at that tooth. Then I am going to have a conversation with Alpha Harlan about the treatment of wolves under his care, including wolves he has decided are wolfless. And then—" He paused. "Then we are going to figure out what is inside you that has been sleeping, because whatever it is, the bonding wine woke it up, and my wolf recognizes it, and I have never known my wolf to be wrong." He stood. He was even larger standing up than sitting down, a fact which should have been obvious, but which her brain insisted on being surprised by anyway. He moved towards the door, and then stopped and turned back. Elara. Yes. I will not touch you until you ask me to. I need you to know that. The bond is significant. My wolf wants to mark you right now. He wants to put his teeth on your neck and tell every wolf within 100 miles that you belong to me. But you are frightened, and you are hurt, and you have been treated like something less than a person, and I will not add to that by taking choices away from you. When you are ready, and only when you are ready, we will talk about the bond. Until then, I am going to be in the next room, and if anyone so much as looks at you wrong, you tell me. Do you understand? She nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. He left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Elara lay in the clean bed and pressed her hands against her chest and felt the thing inside her pulse like a second heartbeat, strong and wild and completely, impossibly alive. Something was waking up. She was terrified. She was also, for the first time in 3 years, warm. The next 2 days existed in a kind of unreality that Elara navigated like a sleepwalker. The healer, a brisk woman named Maren, with silver-streaked hair and hands that smelled like antiseptic and dried rosemary, examined her with the efficient compassion of someone who had seen too many neglected wolves to be shocked but not enough to stop being angry about it. She catalogued Elara's condition out loud to her assistant, and the list was not short. Chronic malnutrition with early signs of bone density loss, healing fracture in the 3rd left rib, approximately 4 weeks old, multiple bruises in varying stages of resolution across both shins and the left forearm, calloused hands with 2 poorly healed cuts on the right palm, a missing molar with early signs of infection in the gum line, dehydration, anemia. When did you break this rib? Maren asked, pressing gently along Elara's side. Elara flinched. I fell carrying wood. The logs shifted and one caught me. Maren looked at her for a long moment with an expression that said she had heard variations of I fell before and had long since stopped believing them. The Alpha King has requested regular updates on your condition, Maren said. I am going to tell him about the rib. Please do not. I am going to tell him about the rib. He should know, and frankly, the man's wolf has been pacing outside this wing for 2 days like a caged bear, and if I do not give him concrete information, he is going to come through the wall. As if to punctuate this, a low, rumbling growl vibrated through the stone floor from somewhere nearby. It was not a threatening sound. It was the sound of a very large wolf being patient far beyond the limits of his natural inclination. Elara ate. This was the most disorienting part. Maren brought her food at regular intervals. Real food, warm food, the kind she had not eaten since her mother was alive. Oat porridge with actual honey and cream. Bone broth thick with barley and herbs. Brown bread that was soft enough to tear with her fingers. Sliced apples. A piece of cheese that was sharp and crumbly and tasted like grass and salt. She ate slowly because her stomach had shrunk from years of insufficient food, and her body was suspicious of abundance. Halfway through the first real meal, she had to stop and breathe through a wave of nausea. And then she cried, not from sadness, but from the simple, overwhelming reality of warm food in a warm room on a clean bed. She cried as quietly as she could, with her face turned into the pillow so no one would hear. But from the other side of the wall, the growl shifted into something lower and more anguished, and she knew the Alpha King had heard. On the second day, he came in. He knocked first, This detail mattered to her more than she could articulate. In Silver Ridge, no one knocked on the storage room door. No one knocked when they came to tell her to haul water or scrub floors or carry platters to the dining hall. Knocking implied that the space belonged to someone, that the person inside had the right to say yes or no. Kael knocked and waited, and only opened the door when she said, "Come in." He was carrying a tray. Elara stared at it. "Maren is busy with a patrol wolf who tangled with a mountain cat," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table with the careful precision of a man who was not accustomed to carrying trays, but was determined to do it correctly. "I brought your lunch. I was not sure what you liked, so I brought options." Options. The tray had soup, bread, a small dish of roasted root vegetables, another small dish of something that looked like stewed berries, a cup of tea, and a cup of water. 6 separate items. He had brought a starving girl options. "Thank you," she said. He sat in the wooden chair. He had clearly claimed it as his chair, the chair beside her bed. He folded his hands between his knees and watched her eat with an expression of fierce concentration that she initially found unnerving until she realized it was not concentration. It was relief. He was watching her eat the way a man watches the sun come up after a long night, like something essential was being restored. "Your wolf," she said halfway through the soup. "You said he wants to mark me. Constantly. He has been howling about it for 2 days. It is very annoying." "What does he look like?" Kael seemed surprised by the question. "Large. Black. Bad temper. Excellent tactical instincts. Terrible social skills." "Is he why you have the scar?" His hand went to his jaw involuntarily. "No. The scar is from the Eastern Border War. A rogue wolf caught me on the left side during a night attack. He was aiming for my throat. He was quick, but his angle was wrong. What happened to him? I killed him. It was not personal. We were at war." He said this the way someone might say, "I took the highway because of traffic." Matter of fact, without bravado. Elara found this more frightening and more honest than any boast would have been. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why did you carry me out, in the Great Hall? You could have called a servant or a guard. You did not have to carry me yourself." Something shifted in his expression. The hard angles softened by a degree, not much, but enough that she could see the man underneath the king. "My wolf would not let anyone else touch you. I am not exaggerating. The moment you collapsed, every wolf in that room became a potential threat. My guards, the healers, the pack members, all of them. My wolf did not distinguish between friend and enemy. You were unconscious and vulnerable, and the bond was screaming, and the only safe pair of hands in that room, as far as my wolf was concerned, were mine. That must have been difficult, in front of everyone. The politics." He almost smiled. It was not quite a smile, more the ghost of one, the suggestion that his face remembered how. "My council is going to have several opinions about it. My beta has already informed me that I have created a diplomatic incident. I told him I would deal with it after you finished breakfast. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. You tripped on a stair because your pack could not be bothered to fix your shoes." He glanced at her feet, which were bare under the blanket. "I had someone look at the shoes you were wearing. They were 2 sizes too large and held together with string. That is why you tripped, not clumsiness. Neglect." She felt heat rise in her face. "I am not usually clumsy." "I know. I watched you carry platters at the feast before the ceremony. You moved through a crowd of 400 wolves without spilling a drop. You are precise and careful, and you compensate for limitations with skill. The shoes were a failure of the people responsible for you, not a failure of yours." No one had ever analyzed her that closely. No one had ever watched her work and drawn conclusions about her competence rather than her status. She looked at him sitting in the wooden chair, this scarred, enormous, terrifyingly powerful man who had watched a serving girl carry platters and noticed that she was good at it, and the thing in her chest pressed against her ribs again, harder this time, and she felt something crack. Not bone, something deeper, something she had built to survive. "I am afraid," she said, "of me. Of everything. Of this bond. Of what I felt when the wine. Something woke up inside me, and I do not know what it is, and I have never had a wolf, and I do not understand why your wolf would choose someone who is nothing. You are not nothing. In this pack, I am less than nothing. I am furniture. I am a pair of hands attached to a mop. In this pack, you are invisible. That is a statement about this pack, not about you." He leaned forward. "I have known you for 2 days, Elara. I have watched you eat 6 meals and speak exactly 43 sentences. In that time, you have shown me more resilience, more grace under pressure, and more raw survival instinct than wolves twice your age with twice your advantages. Whatever is inside you, whatever the wine woke up, my wolf recognizes it as something extraordinary. I trust his judgment." 43 sentences. He had been counting. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you get stronger. Then, if you are willing, I would like to take you to the northern territories, to my lands. I have healers there who specialize in dormant wolves, wolves whose abilities were suppressed or delayed. I think what you have been told about yourself, that you are wolfless, may not be true. And if it is true, if there is nothing inside me, and the bond was a mistake, and your wolf was wrong, then you will be a wolfless woman who is well fed and safe and has a complete set of teeth. And my wolf will not care, because he has already decided, and he does not negotiate." They almost smile again. This time it was closer to real. That afternoon, everything fell apart. Elara was alone in the room. Kael had left to meet with his council, and Maren had finished the afternoon check. The pack house was quiet, in the way it got during the mid-afternoon lull, when most wolves were out on patrol or training or sleeping off lunch. The door opened without a knock. Serena Ashworth stood in the doorway. She was wearing a blue dress instead of the white ceremonial gown, and her white blonde hair was pulled back in a braid that made her cheekbones look sharp enough to cut. Behind her stood 2 of her father's enforcers, thick-necked wolves in leather patrol gear, who filled the hallway. "Get up," Serena said. Elara's stomach contracted. 3 years of conditioned response flooded her body before her brain could intervene. She was already swinging her legs off the bed before she caught herself. "The Alpha King said I should stay in this room," Elara said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Serena walked to the bed. She smelled like white lilac perfume, and something underneath it, something acrid and chemical, that Elara recognized as the smell of barely controlled rage. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Serena said. Her voice was steady, almost pleasant, the way a calm surface conceals a riptide. "My father has spent 6 months negotiating this match. 6 months of letters and emissaries and political concessions. The Northern Alliance would have made Silver Ridge the most powerful Southern pack in 3 generations. And you, a wolfless, nameless, toothless charity case, destroyed it by being too clumsy to carry a cup." "I did not mean to." "Of course you did not mean to. You are not clever enough to have done it on purpose. That is what makes it so grotesque. The most important political ceremony in this pack's history, and it was ruined by an accident." Serena leaned down, close enough that Elara could see the tiny blood vessels in the whites of her eyes. the places where the skin at the corners of her mouth was dry and cracking under her lip color, close enough to see that Serena had been crying, or very close to it, because the rims of her eyes were pink. "He is going to realize it was a mistake," Serena said. Her voice dropped. It was almost a whisper. "The bond, the wine, whatever happened, it was a fluke. The wine responded to proximity, not destiny. And when the king's wolf calms down, and he sees what you actually are, he is going to be embarrassed, and he is going to leave, and my father's alliance will be in ruins, and I will be the laughingstock of every pack between here and the northern border." For a moment, something flickered across Serena's face that was not cruelty. It was fear, the transparent, desperate fear of a woman whose entire value had been calculated in terms of what her marriage could secure, who had been trained and groomed and polished like a weapon pointed at a specific target, and whose weapon had just been rendered useless by a girl with borrowed shoes. It passed quickly. The mask came back. "Get up," Serena said again. "You are coming with me. My father wants to speak with you about the wine, about what exactly you did to it." "I did not do anything to it." "Beta Ashworth thinks differently. He thinks you may have tampered with the ceremony, drugged the wine, sabotaged the bonding ritual. That is insane. Get up." The two enforcers stepped into the room. One of them took Elara's arm above the elbow, and his grip was hard enough that she felt the bruise forming before he even pulled her to her feet. They took her down through the pack house, through the kitchens where she had spent 3 years of her life, past the hearth that she had scrubbed every morning, past the counter where she had kneaded bread dough at 4 a.m. with flour sticking to the sweat on her forearms. The kitchen staff watched her pass. None of them moved. None of them spoke. A girl named Tessa, who Elara had shared a storage room with for 6 months before Tessa was reassigned to the laundry, looked at her with something that might have been pity, or might have been relief that it was not her. They went down. Stone steps, narrow, the walls damp. The air temperature dropped. The smell changed from kitchen smoke and yeast to wet earth and old moisture. The root cellar. Elara's body knew this place. Her muscles knew the way the cold came up through the dirt floor and settled into the joints. Her lungs knew the thick, mineral smell of groundwater seeping through limestone. Her fingers remembered the numbness, the way it started at the tips and crawled inward until her hands felt like blocks of wood. They opened the heavy wooden door and pushed her inside. "You will stay here until my father decides what to do with you," Serena said from the doorway. The blue dress caught a sliver of light from the stairwell. "The Alpha King will lose interest. They always do. And when he leaves, you will still be here. And this will still be your place." The door closed. The bolt slid home. Darkness. Elara stood in the middle of the root cellar, the dirt floor cold and damp beneath her bare feet, and she felt the thing in her chest respond. It was not a gentle stirring this time. It was angry. It rose in her like a wave of heat, flooding from her core outward, into her arms, her legs, her skull. Her fingers tingled, not with cold, but with something electric. Her vision adjusted to the darkness in a way it never had before. The shapes of the root cellar becoming clear. The shelving units, the damp walls. The puddle in the far corner, where groundwater collected, all of it visible in a low amber glow that she realized was coming from her own eyes. Her eyes were glowing. She pressed her hands to her face and felt the heat of it against her palms. A soft, steady luminescence that pulsed with her heartbeat. Inside her chest, the thing that had been sleeping was fully awake now, and it was not small. It was not the tentative, uncertain presence she had felt in the clean linen bed. It was vast. It was old. It filled her from throat to pelvis and pressed against her skin from the inside, and she realized with a shock that nearly buckled her knees that it was not waking up. It was remembering. Images came to her. Not memories, because she had never experienced them. But they had the texture and weight of memories, as if they belonged to someone else who shared her body. A woman with dark hair and golden eyes standing on a mountain ridge, her hands raised to the sky, white light pouring from her palms. A wolf the color of moonlight, enormous, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, standing in a clearing surrounded by ancient trees with silver bark. A voice, her mother's voice, but also not her mother's voice, saying, "You carry the old blood, little one, and it will sleep until it is safe to wake." The heat in her chest crested, and then settled, like a pot that had been boiling and was taken off the flame. The glow faded from her eyes. The root cellar went dark again, but the cold was gone. She was warm as she had been in the clean linen bed, as warm as she had been when she drank the bonding wine, and the dirt floor beneath her feet felt like nothing at all. Above her, through stone and timber and 3 floors of pack house, she heard a roar. It was not a human sound. It was not entirely a wolf sound either. It was something older than both, a sound of pure, absolute fury that shook dust from the cellar ceiling and made the groundwater in the corner ripple. The Alpha King had discovered she was gone. The next several minutes were loud. Elara could not see what was happening, but she could hear it through the cellar ceiling. The heavy percussion of boots, shouts, a crash that sounded like furniture being destroyed, and beneath it all, that constant building roar that vibrated in her teeth. Then the bolt on the cellar door was torn from its housing. Not slid open. Torn out. The metal bracket came away from the wood with a shriek of surrendering nails, and the door slammed open so hard it hit the wall and bounced, and Kyle Blackthorn stood in the doorway. He was partially shifted. This was a thing that very few wolves could do, hold the in-between state where human and beast coexisted in the same body. His eyes were full gold, no amber, no human brown at the edges, just solid, burning gold from lid to lid. His hands were larger than they should have been, the fingers longer, the nails dark and curved. His shoulders had broadened, straining the seams of his shirt. He was breathing hard, and each exhale carried a growl. Behind him, in the stairwell, she could see 2 of his royal guards and Alpha Harlan and Beta Ashworth. The guards looked alert. Alpha Harlan looked grey. Beta Ashworth looked like a man who had just realized that a very large predator was angry with him, and there was nowhere to run. Kyle crossed the cellar in 3 steps. He went to his knees in the dirt in front of her, and his hands, those 2 large, half-shifted hands, cupped her face with a gentleness so extreme it bordered on absurd. "Are you hurt?" he said. His voice was layered, the human words riding on top of a wolf's growl, vibrating against each other. "Elara, are you hurt?" No, she was shaking, but not from cold. From the aftermath of whatever had happened inside her, and from the sheer, overwhelming force of his presence in this small, dark room. "I am not hurt." His thumbs traced the line of her jaw. His eyes scanned her face, her neck, her arms, cataloguing. He found the bruise forming on her upper arm where the enforcer had gripped her, and the growl that came out of him made the shelving unit behind her rattle. "Who?" he said. "One of Beta Ashworth's enforcers." He grabbed my arm. "Which one?" "I do not know his name. Tall, red hair." Kyle stood. He turned toward the doorway, and the way he moved was no longer entirely human. a fluidity that was too smooth, too controlled, predatory in a way that made the animal brain sit up and pay attention. Alpha Harlan. His voice was ice on iron. I have been a guest in your territory for 3 days. In that time, I have discovered that my fated mate has been living under your roof as an unpaid servant. She has been systematically starved. She has a broken rib. She has been confined to a flooded cellar as punishment for transgressions that include the crime of existing. And now, while under my explicit protection, she has been removed from her recovery room by your beta's daughter and imprisoned again. Alpha Harlan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Your Majesty, I assure you I was not aware of— You were not aware. You are the alpha of this pack. You are responsible for every wolf under your roof, including the ones you decided were beneath your notice. That is what being alpha means. It means the wolfless orphan scrubbing your latrines is your responsibility exactly as much as the beta's daughter in the white gown. Harlan's face went through a complicated sequence. He was a big man, solid, iron-haired, the kind of wolf who had held power long enough to forget what it felt like to be challenged. But Kyle was not challenging him. Kyle was stating facts, and the facts were damning, and every wolf in that stairwell could feel the truth of them. Your Majesty. Beta Ashworth stepped forward. His voice was measured and reasonable. My daughter acted rashly. She was upset about the ceremony. But the matter of the bonding wine is still unresolved. This girl has no wolf. The wine should not have responded to her. It is possible that there was interference, tampering. I have a question for you, Beta Ashworth. Kyle's voice had dropped to a conversational register that was far more dangerous than shouting. When you looked at this woman, when you looked at a starving, bruised, wolfless orphan in borrowed shoes, and you decided that the most logical explanation for what happened at the altar was that she had somehow, with resources she does not have and knowledge she could not possess, sabotaged a centuries-old bonding ritual. Did you pause, even for a moment, to consider that perhaps the simplest explanation was the true one? That the wine did exactly what it was designed to do? Beta Ashworth was quiet. In the silence, something interesting happened. A flicker of something crossed his face, too fast for most people to catch. But Alara was watching from the floor of the cellar, and she had spent 3 years reading the micro-expressions of the people who controlled her life. It was not guilt. It was not shame. It was doubt. The specific, private doubt of a man who had spent 6 months building a political alliance on the foundation of his daughter's marriage, and who now, for the first time, was considering the possibility that the foundation had been wrong from the start. That the wine had been telling the truth. That his daughter was never meant for the Alpha King. He looked at Alara. Really looked at her. Perhaps for the first time. And in his eyes, just for a moment, she saw something that might have been recognition. Not of her specifically, but of the situation. Of what he had allowed to happen under his watch. His daughter crying in her room, his pack's reputation in ruins, a starving girl on a dirt floor, and a king with glowing eyes who was about to tear his world apart. He looked away. We will discuss this further, Kyle said, at a formal tribunal. Tonight, in the Great Hall, every member of this pack will attend. Alara will not be returning to any cellar, any storage room, or any servant's quarters. She will be in my wing, under my guard, and the next person who touches her without her consent will answer to me personally, and I will not be in a diplomatic mood. He turned back to Alara. The gold in his eyes dimmed slowly, the human brown returning at the edges. He held out his hand. She took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady and careful, and he helped her to her feet. and they walked out of the cellar together. The dirt fell away from her bare feet as she climbed the stone steps into the light. The tribunal convened at dusk. Elara sat in a chair to the right of the Alpha King's temporary throne in the great hall. She was wearing a dress that was not hers, a simple dark green wool that one of Kael's guards had produced from somewhere, and her hair was clean for the first time in weeks, washed by Maren with actual soap that smelled like mint and nettle. The missing tooth was still there, the gap on the left side, but Maren had treated the infection in the gum, and the persistent ache had faded to nothing, and the absence of that small, constant pain was so disorienting that Elara kept pressing her tongue to the gap, checking. The pack filed in. 400 wolves, their faces arranged in expressions that ranged from curious to frightened to carefully neutral. They filled the benches and stood along the walls and packed the gallery above, and the noise of them settling was like the sound of a flock of birds adjusting on a wire, rustling and murmuring, and then going still. Kael did not stand. He did not need to. The chair he sat in was not particularly large or ornate, just a heavy oak chair that Alpha Harlan used for pack meetings, but the man in it filled the room with the kind of gravity that made standing unnecessary. He was still again, calm again. The half-shifted wildness of the cellar doorway replaced by a controlled stillness that was, in its way, more intimidating. "I will speak plainly," he said. His voice carried without effort to every corner of the hall. "I came to Silver Ridge 3 days ago to explore a potential alliance through a bonding ceremony with Serena Ashworth, the daughter of your beta. At the ceremony, a serving girl named Elara Voss accidentally consumed the bonding wine meant for that ceremony. The wine activated a mate bond between Elara and myself. This bond is genuine. It has been confirmed by my wolf and by the reaction of the wine, which, as you all know, cannot be faked, manipulated, or manufactured." The murmuring started. He waited for it to die. "Since that moment, I have learned that Elara has been living in this pack as an unpaid servant for 3 years. During that time, she has been inadequately fed, denied medical care for injuries, including a broken rib, and confined to a flooded underground cellar as punishment. Earlier today, she was forcibly removed from the recovery room, where I had placed her under my personal protection, and imprisoned in that same cellar again, on orders from Beta Ashworth's daughter." He paused. The hall was very quiet. "I have 3 questions for this pack. First, did anyone in this room know that a young woman was being starved under this roof?" Silence. "Second, did anyone in this room know that she was being locked in a flooded cellar?" More silence. But not the silence of ignorance. The silence of people who had known, or suspected, or chosen not to look too closely, because looking closely would have required action, and action would have required caring about a wolfless orphan, and the cost of caring was higher than the cost of looking away. Third, Kael leaned forward. "Did anyone try to stop it?" A voice from the back of the hall. Small, uncertain. I gave her my portion sometimes, at meals, when no one was watching." Elara turned. The voice belonged to Tessa, the girl from the laundry, the one who had shared the storage room. Tessa was standing near the back wall, her face flushed, her hands twisted in the fabric of her skirt. "I knew it was not enough," Tessa said. "I knew she was not eating enough, but I was afraid that if I said something they would... I was afraid." Kael looked at her for a long moment. "What is your name?" "Tessa Lorne. I work in the laundry." "Tessa Lorne. You were afraid, and you helped anyway. That is noted." He turned back to the pack. "Alpha Harlan, stand." The Alpha of Silver Ridge stood. He looked older than he had 3 days ago. The iron in his hair seemed more grey. His shoulders, which had always been squared with the confidence of unchallenged authority, had dropped by a degree. You are the alpha of this pack. The failure to protect every member of your territory, regardless of status or ability, is your failure. The treatment of Elara Voss is a violation of the accords that govern inter-pack relations, specifically Article 7, which prohibits the abuse or exploitation of any wolf, wolfless, or human residing within pack territory. Harlan swallowed. Your Majesty, I accept responsibility for... I am not finished. The words were quiet and absolute. Beta Ashworth, stand. The Beta stood. His jaw was set. Beside him, Serena sat rigid in her seat, her white blonde braid perfectly arranged, her hands folded in her lap, her face giving away nothing. You knew about the cellar, Kyle said. It was not a question. A muscle twitched in Ashworth's cheek. The cellar was used as a disciplinary measure for a wolfless girl who dropped a plate, for a wolfless girl who was too slow with the morning water, for a wolfless girl who existed in a way that inconvenienced your household. Yes. I have spoken with the kitchen staff. The cellar was used 11 times in 3 years. The longest confinement was 4 days. The cellar floods when it rains. The average temperature in winter is near freezing. You used it on a girl with no wolf healing, no pack protection, and no one to speak for her. Ashworth's throat worked. And then, to the visible surprise of everyone in the hall, including himself, he said something that Elara did not expect. I did not think about it. It was not an excuse. It was not a defense. It was a confession, spoken in the flat, bewildered tone of a man who was genuinely confronting for the first time the weight of what his indifference had allowed. He did not say, I did not know. He said, I did not think about it. There was an ocean of meaning between those 2 sentences. He turned to look at Elara. His eyes were red-rimmed. I did not think about you at all, he said. And that was the cruelty. The hall was silent. It was the kind of silence that has texture, thick and uncomfortable, the silence of collective reckoning. Kyle let it sit. Here is what will happen, he said. Alpha Harlan, you will submit to a formal review of your pack's treatment of all non-wolf and low-ranking members. This review will be conducted by my own pack auditor, and will be completed within 30 days. Beta Ashworth, you are suspended from your position, pending the outcome of that review. The 2 enforcers who physically removed Elara from her room will be stripped of rank and reassigned to manual labor for a period of 6 months. And Serena? Ashworth's voice was rough. Kyle looked at Serena. The Beta's daughter met his gaze with the rigid composure of someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will. Serena Ashworth acted out of fear and desperation. She acted wrongly. But she is not the architect of the system that made her actions possible. That system existed long before she ordered Elara to the cellar. He paused. She will issue a public apology to Elara, and she will live with the knowledge that the alliance she wanted was never hers to have. That is not a punishment I am imposing. That is a reality she will have to make peace with on her own. Serena's composure cracked. Not entirely, not dramatically, but enough that Elara saw her chin tremble once, before she set her jaw and stared straight ahead. Kyle stood. The hall felt smaller. Elara Voss is my fated mate. She is under my protection. She will be leaving Silver Ridge with me when I depart in 3 days. If there are objections, bring them to me directly. I will be in my quarters. He held out his hand to Elara. She took it. And for the second time that day, they walked out of a room together. His fingers wrapped around hers, the pack watching in the silence they had earned. The Northern Territories were not what Elara expected. She had imagined dark forests and stone fortresses, and the kind of grim military austerity that matched the Alpha King's reputation. What she found, after 2 days of travel in a convoy of armored vehicles that wound through mountain passes where the air smelled like pine resin and snowmelt, was something more complex. Blackthorn Keep sat in a valley between 2 peaks, a sprawling compound of dark timber and grey stone that looked like it had grown out of the mountain rather than been built on it. The main hall was enormous, with ceilings high enough to lose in shadow and fireplaces large enough to stand in, but it was also warm, actively, aggressively warm, heated by a geothermal system that Kyle mother had insisted on installing before she died. The floors were polished wood, covered in woven rugs that were thick enough to sleep on. The windows were large, real glass, and they let in the pale, clean light of the mountain sky. The pack compound spread out from the keep in a loose cluster of buildings, barracks, workshops, training grounds, a medical center, a school. Children ran between the buildings. Wolves in human form carried lumber and tools and baskets of food. It looked like a town, a functional, organized, living town, and the people in it moved with the easy confidence of wolves who were well-fed and well-led, and not afraid of their alpha. They were, however, extremely curious about his mate. Elara felt the eyes on her from the moment the convoy doors opened. Hundreds of wolves, pausing in their work, turning to look, scenting the air. She was wearing the green wool dress and a heavy traveling cloak that Kyle had wrapped around her shoulders before they left Silver Ridge, and her hair was clean, and Maren had given her a pair of boots that actually fit, and she still felt like an imposter. "They are staring," she whispered to Kyle. "They are curious. They have been waiting for their Luna for 7 years. I am not a Luna. I do not have a wolf." "You have something. The wine proved that. We are going to find out what." The healer at Blackthorn Keep was named Rowan. He was old, older than anyone Elara had met in the wolf world, with a white beard that reached his chest and eyes that were so dark they looked black. He smelled like dried sage and pine tar, and something faintly metallic that she later learned was ground lodestone, which he kept in a pouch around his neck. He examined her for 3 hours. Not the way Maren had examined her, cataloguing injuries and deficiencies, but something deeper, something that involved his hands hovering over her body without touching, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and rhythmic. Several times he muttered to himself in a language she did not recognize. "Your mother," he said eventually. "She was a healer." "Yes, she traveled between packs. She was wolfless." "She was not wolfless." Elara stared at him. "Your mother was a silverbark wolf, the old bloodline, the ones who predated the pack system, who lived in the wild places before the alphas organized into territories. They were not wolfless. They were something else entirely. Their wolves did not manifest the way modern wolves do, through aggression and dominance and the hierarchy of the pack. Their wolves manifested through stillness, through connection, through the kind of quiet, deep power that does not announce itself because it does not need to. My mother never shifted. Your mother never needed to. A silverbark wolf does not shift because shifting is a response to threat, and a silverbark does not respond to threat by becoming a predator. A silverbark responds to threat by becoming immovable, unbreakable, a root system instead of a blade. Your mother's wolf was not absent. It was patient. It was waiting. Waiting for what? Rowan looked at her with those dark, depthless eyes. For you. The power skips generations. The daughter of a silverbark is not a silverbark. She is something the old texts call a moon bloom, a wolf that only manifests when the conditions are exactly right, when the body is safe enough, and the bond is strong enough, and the need is great enough. The bonding wine. The bonding wine created the conditions. It stripped away the walls your body had built to protect you. 3 years of starvation, abuse, isolation. Your wolf retreated so deep inside you that she was invisible. The wine pulled her to the surface, and the mate bond anchored her there. Elara pressed her hand to her chest. The presence was there, warm and steady, a low hum beneath her heartbeat. What does it mean? What can I do? I do not know yet. The Silverbark bloodline has been considered extinct for 2 centuries. The Moonbloom is a myth, a story old wolves tell around fires. I have never examined one before. I have never met anyone who has. He smiled, and it transformed his face, the severity cracking into something warm and weathered and deeply curious. We will find out together. Kyle was waiting outside the healer's wing. He was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and the moment Elara came through the door, his head came up, and his nostrils flared, and his eyes tracked her the way a compass needle finds north. "Well," he said, "apparently I am a mythological creature." One eyebrow rose. "My mother was from an extinct bloodline called the Silverbark Wolves. My wolf is something called a Moonbloom. It has been dormant my entire life, and the bonding wine woke it up. Rowan says the Silverbark bloodline has been considered extinct for 200 years. Kyle processed this for approximately 3 seconds. My wolf chose a mythological creature as his mate. This explains a great deal about his personality. Are you not surprised? I'm surprised that there is a name for it. I'm not surprised that you are extraordinary. I have known that since the Great Hall. You have known me for 5 days. I have known you were mine for 5 days. There is a difference." He pushed off the wall. "Are you hungry?" "I'm always hungry." "Good. I had the kitchen make 7 different things because I was not sure what you liked. I am starting to think this is going to be a theme." She almost laughed. The sound surprised her. It felt foreign in her throat, rusty, like a hinge that had not been used in years. Kyle heard it, and his expression did something complicated, a softening around the eyes and a tightening around the jaw that she was beginning to recognize as the face he made when he wanted to touch her and was restraining himself. "Kyle, yes, you can touch me, if you want." He went very still. "Are you sure?" "No, but I want to be." He reached out, slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and his hand settled on the back of her neck. Just that, his palm against her skin, his fingers curving around the side of her throat, warm and heavy and steady. The contact sent a pulse through her body that started at his palm and ended at the base of her spine. The thing in her chest, her wolf, whatever she was, surged upward, pressing against her ribs, straining toward his touch like a plant turning toward light. "Oh," she breathed. "Yeah," he said roughly. "It does that." They stood in the hallway of Blackthorn Keep, his hand on her neck, her heart hammering, and the mate bond humming between them like a live wire. And for a moment, the world was very simple. Then his beta, a compact, sharp-eyed man named Declan, who had been running the Northern Territory's logistics for 10 years, and who possessed the rare gift of terrible timing, came around the corner with a sheaf of papers and the expression of a man bearing bad news. "My king, we have a problem." Kyle's hand did not leave Elara's neck. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that comes with an army. The Eastern clans have mobilized. 300 wolves crossed the border at dawn. They are heading for the northern pass. The hand tightened. Not on her neck, that stayed gentle, but she could see the muscles in his forearm cord, the tendons standing out. His eyes went gold at the edges. "Victor," he said. "Victor." "How many confirmed?" 300 at the crossing point. Intelligence says another 200 in reserve. And there is something else. Declan's eyes flicked to Elara, then back to Kyle. "Victor's messenger arrived an hour ago. He is asking for a meeting. He says he wants to discuss a trade." "A trade of what?" He did not specify to the messenger, but the message said, and I quote, "I hear the king found something interesting in the south. I would like to discuss it." The gold in Kyl's eyes went solid. The growl that came from his chest was not loud, but Elara felt it vibrate through his hand on her neck, through her spine, through the floor. "He knows about Elara," Kyle said. "Word travels fast. 400 witnesses at the bonding ceremony. Silver Ridge is not known for discretion. Victor wants my mate. Victor wants whatever gives him leverage. Your mate, a silverbark bloodline, a moon-bloom wolf. If even half of what Rowan told me is true, the old bloodline would be worth more to the eastern clans than any territory or treaty." Kyle turned to Elara. His face was the Alpha King's face now, the hard angles and controlled fury, the scar like a white line of old violence, but his hand on her neck was still gentle. "Elara, do you trust me?" "I do not know you well enough to trust you." His mouth quirked. "Honest. Good. Will you trust me to keep you safe while we figure out what Victor wants?" She looked at him, at the gold in his eyes and the steadiness of his hand, and the way his body had positioned itself, without conscious thought, between her and the direction Declan had come from, as if the threat were already in the hallway, instead of 100 miles away. "Yes," she said. "Then stay close to me. Do not leave the keep without my guard. And if anyone you do not recognize approaches you, scream. My wolf will hear it from anywhere in this valley." "I do not scream. I have never been a screamer." "Then say my name. He will hear that too." Declan cleared his throat diplomatically. "The War Council, my king. Assemble them. We move in an hour." Kyle looked at Elara one more time. His thumb traced a small circle on the side of her neck, just below her ear, and the sensation made her breath catch. "Eat the 7 things. I will be back." He walked away, and the hallway felt colder without him. Elara ate 4 of the 7 things, appetite limited by the knot of anxiety that had taken up residence in her stomach. She was sitting in the quarters Kyle had given her, a room with an actual bed with actual pillows, and a window that looked out over the valley, eating roasted chicken and soft bread, and a soup that tasted like mushrooms and thyme, when the thing in her chest stirred. Not the warm, steady hum she had grown accustomed to. This was different, sharp, urgent, a pulse of something that felt like warning. She put down the bread. The sensation intensified. It was directional, pulling her attention toward the window, toward the mountain pass to the north. She went to the window and looked out. The valley was quiet in the early evening light, gold and purple, the peaks casting long shadows. Nothing moved on the northern ridge, but she could feel it, something coming, something wrong. Her eyes began to glow. She saw it in her reflection in the window glass, the amber light spilling from her pupils, and she pressed her hands to the cold glass, and the glow traveled down her arms, into her palms, and the glass beneath her fingers warmed, and then she felt it. Wolves. Dozens of them, moving through the northern pass, their paws on stone, their breath in the cold air, the collective hum of pack mind linking them together in a web of intention and aggression. She could not see them. She could feel them. The way you feel vibration through a floor, through walls, the awareness that something massive is in motion, even if you cannot identify the source. They were closer than Declan had said. Much closer. Elara ran. She found the War Council in the main hall. 6 wolves gathered around a table covered in maps. Kyle at the head, Declan at his shoulder, the others in various postures of intense discussion. She burst through the doors and every head turned, 6 pairs of eyes. But she was looking at only one pair. "They are in the pass," she said. "Right now. Dozens of them. Not 300, not yet, but an advance force, moving fast, and they are already past the outer boundary." Silence. "How do you know this?" Declan asked. "I felt them. Through the glass, through the ground. I do not know how, but they are there, and they are close, and they are not stopping." Kyle looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then he turned to Declan. "Send scouts to the northern pass, now. Full speed. My king, she is my mate, and her wolf is older than our pack system, and she says they are in the pass. Send the scouts." The scouts returned in 20 minutes. Their report confirmed every detail. 40 Eastern Clan wolves, moving in tactical formation through the northern pass, 2 hours from the valley perimeter. They had bypassed the outer sentries using a goat trail that was not on any map. Kyle looked at Elara from across the war table. His eyes were fully gold. His wolf was very close to the surface. You felt them through the glass, and through the floor, through the stone, through the ground. I do not understand it. "Rowan," Kyle said. The old healer had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. "Is this what a moon bloom does?" Rowan was staring at Elara with an expression of pure, scholarly wonder. A silverbark wolf was connected to the land, to the territory itself. They could feel the health of the soil, the movement of water, the paths of animals. A moon bloom, according to the old texts, takes that connection further. She does not just feel the land, she feels everything on it, every paw, every foot, every heartbeat that touches the ground within her range. How far is her range? I have no idea. The texts are 200 years old, and half of them are poetry. Kyle turned back to the war table. "Declan, mobilize the 1st and 2nd battalions. Full defensive formation on the valley perimeter. 3rd Battalion holds the keep." "And the meeting Victor requested? Tell him I will meet him at the northern pass. Dawn. He wants to talk. We will talk." Elara stepped forward. "You are not going alone." "I'm very much going alone." Your wolf recognized me as his mate. Whatever is inside me detected a threat that your entire sentry network missed. I do not know what I am or what I can do, but I know that if I stay here while you walk into a negotiation with a man who wants to use me as leverage, I will be useless to you. If I am there, at least I can tell you if he is lying about the size of his force." Kyle stared at her. Around the table, the War Council stared at her. Declan opened his mouth, closed it, and turned to look at Kyle. "She is not wrong," Declan said, and he sounded like it physically pained him to admit it. "She is not going into a combat zone. The Northern Pass is not a combat zone. It is a negotiation site, and she will be surrounded by your guard." Kyle's jaw worked. The scar along his temple went white. He was fighting with his wolf. Elara could see it, the beast wanting to lock her in a tower and stand in front of the door, and the man recognizing that she was offering something that could make the difference between winning and losing. "If I take you," he said, "you stay behind me. You do not speak unless I ask you to. You do not leave my line of sight. And if anything goes wrong, you run. You do not fight. You do not try to help. You run back to the keep, and you tell Declan to seal the gates. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Say it back to me. Stay behind you. Do not speak unless asked. Do not leave your sight. Run if something goes wrong." "That will do." Dawn came cold and grey, the mountain peaks hidden in cloud, the air sharp with the smell of frost and pine. Elara stood behind Khael at the northern pass, flanked by 20 of his strongest wolves, and watched Victor of the eastern clans approach. Victor was not what she expected. Where Khael was dark and broad, and built like the mountains he ruled, Victor was lean and pale, with ash-blonde hair and grey eyes, and the long, narrow face of a wolf bred for speed rather than power. He moved with a loose, easy grace that was probably meant to look relaxed, and instead looked like a predator, pretending to be harmless. He wore black leather and no armor, and he had brought only 5 wolves with him, which was either a gesture of good faith or the confidence of a man who did not think he needed more. "Blackthorn." Victor's voice was light, pleasant, the kind of voice that was easy to listen to and easy to underestimate. "Thank you for meeting me. You crossed my border with 300 wolves. Gratitude seems premature." "A misunderstanding. I heard you had acquired something rare, and I wanted to see it for myself. My wolves are enthusiastic." Victor's grey eyes slid past Khael to Elara, and the pleasantness in his expression sharpened into something else. Interest. Hunger. And there she is, the Moonbloom. Khael shifted, his body blocking Victor's line of sight to Elara. The movement was slight, almost casual, but its meaning was absolute. "You know what she is." "I know what the old stories say. I also know that my grandmother, who was born in the Eastern Mountains before the clan wars, used to tell me that the Silverbark wolves were the true rulers of this land. Not the alphas, not the kings. The wolves who were connected to the earth itself. She said they could feel a lie the way you feel a change in the wind. She said they could heal the land when it was sick and break it when they were angry." His eyes tried to find Elara again. "She said the last Moonbloom could bring down a mountain. My mate is not a weapon. Everything is a weapon, Blackthorn. The question is, who gets to aim it?" Elara pressed her bare hands to the stone of the pass. She did not know why. Instinct. The thing inside her was vibrating, responding to the ground beneath her, to the wolves standing on it. She could feel Khael's 20 guards, their heartbeats steady and alert. She could feel Victor's 5 wolves, their heartbeats faster, nerves masked by discipline. And she could feel more. Behind Victor, concealed in the tree line, hidden in the rocks and gullies of the pass, more wolves. Many more. Their collective heartbeat thrummed through the stone like a second pulse. "He has more wolves," she said quietly, "in the trees, 50, maybe 60, flanking us from both sides." Every wolf on their side went taut. Khael did not take his eyes off Victor. "You brought an ambush to a negotiation," Khael said. Victor's pleasant expression did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted. "Insurance. Surely you understand." "I understand that you are standing in a mountain pass with 60 wolves hidden badly enough that my mate felt them through the ground, and you are outnumbered by the 200 wolves I have positioned on the ridgeline above us. I understand that you came here thinking the Moonbloom was a myth, and finding out she is real has changed your calculations. And I understand that you are now trying to decide whether the risk of fighting me for her is worth the cost." Victor's eyes finally found Elara. She was kneeling, her palms flat on the stone, her eyes glowing amber in the grey dawn light. The glow was stronger now than it had been in the cellar, brighter, steady, and the ground beneath her hands was warm despite the frost. "Let me save you the calculation," Kael continued. "It is not worth the cost. Nothing is worth the cost. You could bring every wolf in the eastern clans to this pass, and it would not be enough, because my wolf will die before he lets you touch her, and I have never lost a fight, and I do not intend to start today." Victor looked at Kael. He looked at the ridgeline where, presumably, 200 Northern Territory wolves were waiting. He looked at Elara, whose glowing eyes were fixed on the tree line where his hidden wolves crouched. "You know," Victor said, and for a moment his voice lost its pleasant veneer and became something plain and tired. "My grandmother would have loved this. She spent her whole life looking for evidence that the old bloodlines survived. She died convinced that they were extinct. If she could see your mate right now, kneeling on the stone with her eyes like lanterns—" He trailed off. He ran a hand through his ash-blonde hair, and for just a moment he looked like a man instead of a warlord. A man who had grown up on stories told by a woman he loved, stories about wolves connected to the earth, and who was now seeing those stories walk and breathe in front of him. My grandmother would have wept. Then the mask came back. "Withdraw your wolves from the trees," Kael said. "Go back across the border. The moon bloom is not for sale, not for trade, and not for taking. If you come to my territory again without invitation, I will treat it as an act of war." Victor held Kael's gaze for a long time. Then he smiled, a real smile, weary and sharp and honest. "Tell your mate to take her hands off the stone. She has been heating it for the last 30 seconds, and my wolves are getting nervous." Elara looked down. The stone beneath her palms was glowing faintly, hairline fractures of amber light spreading from her fingertips like roots. She lifted her hands. The glow faded. The stone cracked once, a small sound like an egg tapping a counter, and a thin fissure ran through the granite from where her palms had been. Victor looked at the crack. He looked at Elara. He looked at Kael. "Well," he said, "that is something." He turned and walked back down the pass. His 5 visible wolves fell in behind him. In the tree line, the hidden wolves began to move, pulling back, retreating, their heartbeats fading from Elara's awareness one by one. Kael did not move until the last heartbeat was gone. Then he turned to Elara, still kneeling on the cracked stone, her hands shaking, her eyes fading from amber back to their natural dark brown. "You cracked a mountain pass," he said. "I did not mean to. You detected a hidden army through the ground. You heated stone with your bare hands. You cracked granite. I was scared. You were magnificent." She looked up at him. The dawn light was coming through the clouds now, pale gold, catching the edges of his scar and the gold in his eyes. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her in the healer's room, the way he had looked at her in the cellar doorway, the way he had looked at her across the war table. Like she was the most important thing in any room she occupied. "I want to go home," she said. And then she stopped, because she had said home, and she had meant Blackthorn Keep, and she had only been there for 2 days. Kael held out his hand. She took it. The marking ceremony took place 3 weeks later. Elara could have waited longer. Kael would have waited forever. She knew that. He would have sat in the wooden chair beside every bed she slept in for the rest of his life, counting her sentences and bringing her trays with too many options, if that was what she needed. He had told her he would not touch her until she asked, and he had meant it with the kind of absolute certainty that only a man at war with his own wolf could manage. But 3 weeks of eating real food, and sleeping in a real bed, and training with Rowan to understand the power that lived inside her, had changed Elara in ways she was still cataloguing. Her body was different. The sharp edges of starvation had softened, her cheeks filling out, her arms gaining the lean muscle that came from Rowan's exercises, which involved standing barefoot on different types of ground and learning to listen. She could feel the entire valley now. Every wolf, every deer, every rabbit in its burrow. The network of underground streams that fed the geothermal system. The root structures of the ancient pines that gave Blackthorn Keep its shelter. She was not invisible anymore. She was connected. To the land, to the pack, and to the man whose wolf howled her name every night from the ridge above the keep, because he would not let himself howl it inside the walls. She found him in his study, a room at the top of the keep that smelled like old leather and lamp oil, and the cedar shavings he used to line his wardrobe. He was reading a report, his reading glasses on, which was a detail about the Alpha King that no one outside the keep knew, and which Elara found disproportionately endearing. "I am ready," she said from the doorway. He took the glasses off. "Ready for what?" "The mark, the bond, the ceremony, whatever you want to call the thing, where your wolf puts his teeth on my neck and tells every wolf within 100 miles that I belong to you." He set the report down very carefully. "You are quoting me from the healer's room. I have a good memory. You have an excellent memory. You remember every word I say, which is both flattering and terrifying." He stood. He came around the desk. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could smell him. Cedar and rain stone and lightning, the scent that had pulled her out of darkness on the altar steps, the scent that her wolf recognized as home. "Elara, be sure." "I am sure. Because once my wolf marks you, it is permanent. It is not a ceremony that can be undone. It is a bond that persists through death. It is the most intimate, most absolute claim one wolf can make on another. I need you to understand what you are agreeing to." She stepped forward, closing the distance between them until she was close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. She put her hand on his chest. Beneath her palm, his heart was pounding, a hard, fast rhythm that contradicted the calm control of his voice. His wolf was right there, right beneath the surface, barely contained. "Your wolf has been howling on the ridge every night for 3 weeks, she said. "My wolf has been pressing against my ribs trying to answer. I have cracked a mountain pass, detected an army through stone, and heated granite with my bare hands. And the only thing that makes any of that feel like it makes sense is you. I did not choose this bond. I tripped on a stair and swallowed wine that was not mine. But I am choosing you now, not because the bond tells me to, because you counted my sentences, because you brought 7 things when you did not know what I liked, because you went to your knees in a dirt cellar and asked if I was hurt before you asked who did it, because you are the most powerful wolf alive and you knocked on my door." His eyes were gold, full gold. His breathing was not entirely steady. "I am choosing you, Kyle Blackthorn. Mark me." He moved. His hands were in her hair, tilting her head, and his mouth was on hers, and the kiss was not gentle. It was not the careful, restrained touch of a man managing his wolf. It was the kiss of a man who had been holding himself back for 3 weeks and 27 years, and his entire life, and the dam had broken. He kissed her like drowning, like breathing, like the world began and ended at the place where his lips met hers. The mate bond ignited. It was not the gradual warmth of the bonding wine. It was a detonation, heat and light, and the sensation of 2 separate beings becoming something unified, something whole, something that was greater than the sum of its parts. Her wolf surged upward, and this time she did not retreat or sleep or hide. She bloomed. She opened like a flower in Elara's chest, vast and luminous and ancient. And she reached for Kael's wolf with a certainty that was older than language. His wolf answered. Kael's mouth moved from her lips to her jaw, to the side of her neck, to the place where her pulse beat strongest, and she felt his teeth, human teeth, on the edge of something else, pressing against her skin. Yes, she said. He bit. Pain. Sharp, bright, and then not pain at all, but something that defied categorization, pleasure and connection, and the absolute, unshakable knowledge of belonging. The mark seared into her skin like a brand made of starlight. She felt it spread through her body, through her blood, through the wolf inside her, and she felt it reach for Kael and find him and lock into place with the finality of a key turning in a lock that had been waiting to be opened. In the valley below, every wolf in the Northern Territory pack stopped what they were doing. They felt it. The bond. The Luna's bond. It pulsed through the ground like a heartbeat, through the stone of the keep, through the roots of the ancient pines, through the water and the soil and the mountain itself. A moonbloom, marked by an alpha king. A bond 2 centuries overdue. Kael lifted his head. There was blood on his lips. Her blood. His eyes were solid gold, and his wolf was in every line of his face, and he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that had ever mattered. Mine, he said. Yours. Luna of the Northern Territories. I do not know how to be a Luna. You cracked a mountain pass with your bare hands. I think you will manage. Below them, the pack began to howl. One voice, then 10, then 100, rising from the valley like smoke, rising from the barracks and the training grounds and the medical center and the school, a chorus of wolves welcoming their Luna, the sound filling the mountain air until the peaks themselves seemed to vibrate with it. Elara pressed her forehead against Kael's chest. His arms came around her, heavy and warm, and she breathed in cedar and rainstone and lightning, and the thing in her chest, her wolf, her moonbloom, her inheritance from a mother who had died in a lean-to with calendula-stained fingers, settled into place like a river finding the sea. She was not invisible. She was not furniture. She was not the mechanism by which floors were scrubbed and fireplaces were stocked and ceremonial linens were pressed. She was the woman who had tripped on a stair and swallowed wine that was not hers and cracked a mountain pass and been claimed by a king who counted her sentences. She was home. 6 months later, Elara stood barefoot on the stone terrace of Blackthorn Keep, her hands resting on the railing, the morning cold biting at her cheeks. Below her, the valley was white with early snow, and the pack moved through it in dark clusters, breath steaming, voices carrying in the thin mountain air. 2 children were throwing snowballs near the training grounds, their laughter sharp and bright as broken glass. Inside the keep, she could hear Kael arguing with Declan about supply routes. His voice was low and certain, and faintly annoyed, the way it always was when Declan was right about something logistical, and Kael did not want to admit it. She could hear Rowan in the healer's wing, grinding something in a mortar, the rhythmic scrape of stone on stone. She could feel the wolves on the perimeter patrol, their heartbeats steady and sure, their paws on the frozen ground, a constant background pulse in her awareness. She pressed her palms flat on the stone railing. The stone warmed beneath her hands, not glowing, not cracking, just warm. A gentle thing, a choice instead of a reflex. Behind her, the door opened. Kael came out onto the terrace. He was carrying 2 cups. He handed her one. Tea, hot, with honey. He stood beside her, his shoulder touching hers, and they looked out over the valley together. "Tessa wrote," he said. "What did she say?" The pack audit is finished. Alpha Harlan stepped down voluntarily. The new Alpha is a woman named Cora, who was the head of patrol. Tessa has been promoted to household management. She says to tell you she fixed the water crank on the east courtyard well. Elara wrapped both hands around the cup. The steam rose between her fingers, carrying the smell of honey and chamomile. "Good," she said. Kael's hand found the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the scar of the marking bite, the place where his teeth had sealed the bond. Her wolf hummed in response, a low, contented vibration that she felt in her spine. "You are standing in the snow without shoes," he observed. "I can feel the valley better this way. There is a doe and 2 fawns near the east tree line. The geothermal spring on the north slope is running warmer than usual, and Declan is stress-eating in the kitchen, which means you were difficult in the meeting." "I was not difficult. I was resolute. He has crumbs on his shirt. That is your fault." Kael's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Closer than most people ever got. His thumb made another slow circle on her neck, and she leaned into his side, and the tea warmed her hands, and the snow fell. And in the valley below, a wolf howled once, long and clear, and the sound echoed off the mountains and came back changed, doubled, as if the land itself were answering.